I guess there's enough of you new people keep hanging on, goddamn you, that we'll keep meeting on Tuesday for a while. A bit more about what I was speaking about people identifying a problem with trying to expand their consciousness, trying to reach that erstwhile known state of grace in religion, that kind of enlightenment. After I've talked about it several nights, maybe you have some notion on your own, or you should, that it is not a play trying to make an end run around rhetorical structures, and it's not just playing with words. It is a very subtle operation of the mind, wherein if you tell people, may I go back to religion, which is always the easiest example, that being sort of the public structure at best of the kind of effort for a person to actually expand their own consciousness. But in the idea of all religions, of course, is the idea of some opposition to a person improving themselves, commonly known, I believe, as evil doers, evil forces, Lucifers and demons, but evil forces some way operating in the universe and up with which a man must put, if not oppose, to ever get anywhere. With ordinary people, with the ordinary mind, if they will settle for that, it is proof on the face of it that that's all they want. If you're satisfied with feeling, as everyone, all sane people do, dissatisfied here, and there is no ultimate satisfaction, it is not the job of ordinary consciousness to reach some conclusive degree of success. It is not supposed to reach any final achievement. And so if an ordinary person, if anybody finds an idea of religion, and it being pointed out that you are actually upset, that you are actually discombobulated, you are disoriented, you are unsettled in life, but it's not your fault. It is the fault of outside forces of a very specific nature, that there is an absolute enemy. The most subtle danger that I'm not going to keep harping on, because you either see it or you don't, the trap is once you accept that, is you have dissipated, to be charitable, a large part of your, to be more truthful, damn near all of it, whether you make any effort or not. It doesn't require that once someone, well, let's take Christianity, well, that there is an evil force, represented by Satan, even if you didn't believe in a literal horned creature running around attempting to get in your pocket and in your pants and in your head and inside of your Beatle collection. That's not the Beatles. The Doobie Brothers? No. You know I'm not an expert on religious matters, so I could be wrong. Could be the Beach Boys for all I know. Once you accept the fact that there is a specified enemy, that there is an opposition to whatever you're trying to do, you're trying to be a better person, you're trying to grow, as long as you accept the idea that there is a specific, whether you understand it or not, if you buy into, if you accept an institutional story from a religion or from just one street corner preacher, if you accept the idea that somewhere there is an evil something, there is an absolute force opposing you trying to be a better person, whatever they call it, being a Christian, a Jew, Buddhist, a follower of belief X, but they say there is specific opposition. And that comes as no shock to anyone, because everyone thinks, all sane people think, well, yeah, all my life I've been trying to do better. If they're on the simplistic level, still enough to just think about behavior, but they realize all my life I've tried to do better. I've been trying to quit drinking. I've been trying to quit being so hostile to people. And God knows I mean well. I try to do it, and I don't know, something happens. And they go. And no, if that's all you need, you are, in a sense, people now, if you're grown and you, a few years past that, you forget the original impact of that, but at first it's a kind of relief that you think, well, at least someone knows what I'm up against. Mm-hmm. No, they don't. Anybody that tells you what you're up against, they don't know what you're up against. That is, anyone who names it and says, well, I'll tell you what the problem is. And that can be a priest, it can be a rabbi identifying evil forces, or it could be a psychiatrist giving you his theory of a subconscious trauma, some phobia, But anyone who will name to you what your problem is, they do not know what the problem is. And I don't mean just yours. They don't know what's going on. They're part of it. They're part of what, if you were outside the system, you would call the problem. I, being charitable, do not call it a problem. They're part of the structure. But they cannot point out what a problem is, and if they point out specifically what it is, if you need any further proof that they don't know what they're talking about, that's it. So, if you accept the fact that there is a known, nameable opposition to you trying to improve yourself, you will, no matter how hard you try, expend such an amount of your energy on it that the question of you ever actually trying to do anything becomes almost irrelevant. It becomes almost no longer your problem. And I guess as vague as that sounded, I can make it crude again to use some of the examples you seem to like better. You can almost, if you decide you want to lose weight rather than become more enlightened, why not? If you said you wanted to lose weight or quit drinking, but let's lose weight, and I pointed out in a sense, without being sarcastic with ordinary people, but it should be a kind of punch in your neural ribs to realize if they're overweight due to overeating, there are some people that's the case. I know most of us who are overweight, it's genetic and there's nothing we can do about it. So I'm talking about people that simply overeat. There is a kind of, if I may say so just between us, a kind of sort of sardonic humor over the fact that you're going to go pay somebody some amount of money to go over there, and in some way, I'm not sure what they do, but the promise is they're going to help you lose weight. Now, I don't know, maybe it's some sort of secret initiation over there, maybe even more arcane than the Masons. My suspicion is that they take you in there and they give you a menu and tell you not to eat as much. I mean, that's just my guess. Of course, I guess a bigger bargain, you say you want to quit drinking and you go over to AA, and I don't even think they charge you money. And I think it's pretty straightforward what they do. It's no great secret. They say, stop drinking. We know it's almost impossible, but every time you want to drink, we'll call over and sit around and talk to you and drive you crazy and make you take up smoking or something. The little humor being what I was trying to point out. All institutional or all ordinary people's idea of change, they always have to find support. There always has to be somebody to point out what should be done. You can end up, and I'm not going to try to improve this, you either see it or you don't because it's not some absolute rule, but you surely can understand by now that a person, and we're not questioning what they say, they simply proclaim that they want to lose weight, and they go join up one of these programs. And they're always having sales on, and I know how that kind of thing operates. So once you sign up, if you'll sign up for 2 extra months after the first meeting, I'm sure they give you a break, and they have all sorts of things. There's always activity. It's known among preachers as the building fund dynamic, that you're always trying to build a new wing onto the church, if you know what you're doing. Because there's nothing going on in the church, and he knows it, being part of the system, and so you always have, as Mississippi mystics used to call it, busy work. You can go over and join up one of these groups to lose weight. Now you do it, what I want you to see is, you have to do it real quick because it's not some sort of rule, and it's not just either this or that. But part of the benefit of going over there and joining up and paying money and getting around other people, which in a sense is absolutely ridiculous, that if your problem is overeating, how can you call yourself an adult, intelligent, just semi-conscious human and not know that the trick is don't eat as much? Or the trick to stop, I want to quit drinking. Okay. I mean, how simple can it be? Besides all the stories of my systems accustomed to alcohol, and it gives me the shakes when I try. All right, but you said you wanted to stop. Yes, I do. Well, so what's the problem? I mean, why do you need people to help? You either stop or you don't stop. Now, that's not the way ordinary life works, but between you and me, you do understand that there is that kind of in-your-face blunt, pathetic humor. Sardonic was too easy. Pathetic humor. But with ordinary people, it doesn't matter. But back to the point. Do you understand that a person can go over then and be involved with the meetings and it becomes a form of busy work, and let's assume that they do not live up to the Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, whoever it is, what the program is, they say, now here it is, if you will follow this, based upon your weight and your height and your activity, if you'll follow this schedule we've made out for you, you will lose weight. Which, you know, doesn't take a genius to figure it out, but let's say that it's correct. And let's say that you cannot quite bring yourself to do it because, for one thing, it does not include 6 packs of Twinkies every night before bed. And so you immediately have some problem, like they tell a man who wants to quit drinking, hey, don't drink anymore. He goes, well, you know, you mean cut down? No, quit. Well, you mean like next month? Quit now. See, there's always a slight problem. But here goes what I was pointing out in general. If you become involved with an identifiable problem and you get involved with external help, direction, assistance, support, then the person can go over to the group, whoever it is. They can go over there every week to some sort of meeting, pay their money. Every week go there and pay their money to go there, be weight or whatever they do, and they all sit around, I guess, a support group and talk. And let's say that you do not follow the regimen that they gave that would have worked, that you are not losing the weight that you intended to. But, real quick, now you just have to look, it's just the way life is situated, not with everybody, but this is what holds it all together. Going over to the meeting once a week can help make up. You dissipate the energy by going to the meeting and everything involved with it, of being involved, paying the money for you to quit eating. Think about it. But back to that's just between us. But paying money not to eat, paying money to somebody else, never mind, I'm being silly. It's obvious that they're right and we're wrong. But you go over there, my fictitious ordinary person, and if you do not lose the weight that you intended, if you do not lose the weight that they said you could lose by following their schedule, you do understand that people will stay involved with that and maybe speak very highly of it, and it will become part of their life. And the balancing act, the unknown equation, the unrecognized equation in life is, even though they're not losing weight, which they said was the aim, or they're not losing weight at the rate they wanted to, the amount, the going over there helps counterbalance it, that they expend energy, the kind of energy that they were sitting around the house worrying about losing weight. Now they can go over there. All right, it's the same thing with religion, same thing with psychiatry, it's the same thing with all human gatherings. It is when it becomes a human institution is when that sort of ploy, it's not a conspiracy and it's not anybody pulling it on people, it's part of the structure of life, but it is a kind of, once it becomes institutionalized, it's a kind of ledger domain, such as you go into church, if you're religious, and you go to church and they promise, the main thing with all religions is they promise you life after death. And not one son of a bitch can prove it. You can't get your money back. You know, if you die and you don't go to heaven or paradise, you even find out that the people teaching it, you say, well, are you a Christian? Are you a real Jew? And they, oh no, all we can do is try. Or you go to a psychiatrist, and he tells you the treatment, how much it costs, and you say, well, you're completely sane. Oh, heavens no. Or you go to Weight Watchers, and the woman at the front desk is 50 pounds overweight, and nobody notices. Of course, she's going to say, I'm sure that, you know, she speaks highly of the program, that she's lost 50 pounds already. You should have seen her before she got a job there. Try it really bluntly so I can move on. Remembering, as always, is not a conspiracy. No one's involved with it, knows what they're doing. It's not anybody trying to trick you. But you understand that you can go to an organized, an institutional kind of setting, other people involved, and you say that you're trying to improve yourself, which is some form of trying to become more conscious, even if it's as crude as losing weight or quit drinking, that either case, if you would be better off than you are if you say so. If you can't do it, if you do not just do it directly, then going over there helps you dissipate the kind of energy that you might have been involved with, sitting around home worrying about whether you could lose weight, worrying about not losing weight, worrying about that you're still drinking too much, that just going there, or going to a church, going to any sort of meeting that claims to do so-and-so, or going to analysis, because everyone in analysis, if they're fairly sophisticated, as you should all know, no one will say that they have been cured of whatever it was that they thought that drew them to seeking analytic treatment. They will say, well, certainly I'm not cured. But you're so used to hearing it in movies, if you've never been around people in analysis, you're so used to it, you think, well, you're just used to it. But think about it. You go to a person that charges you $200 an hour, and people will stand up and look proudly, yes, I've been in analysis now, not only 10 years, but I'm talking 10 years, and I have not missed my twice-a-week meetings, not once. Colds, earaches, death in the family, 10 years, twice a week, never fail. And so you're cured. They'll look at you like you're crazy. Cured? But you're used to it. What you should be is kind of looking at life crazy, or them crazy, like, you've been going to a guy for 10 years and nothing's changed. And it's not that silly, because people do it in religion. For 60, 70 years, they do it a lifetime. They do it believing in government. They do it believing that life in general out there, that there's some aspect of it that's important, more important than some other aspect, other than staying alive, of course. Once you accept the problem, there's 2 or 3 stages. They all run together. But at first, it's like someone else strike like. In everyone's case, someone does have to point out what the problem is once they get past the simplistic physical level. If you're overweight, well, that may even take somebody. Well, most cases, that you keep going out to a singles bar, and you can't pick up anybody, and finally, the bartender or somebody says, well, I can't believe you don't know it, but, you know, you look like a pig. And you go, really? And they go, you know, if you lost maybe 200 pounds, you might get lucky. But if you get past that kind of physical thing, which would assume the guy sort of figured out on his own, except to notice in my case, somebody even had to tell him that. But if it gets non-physical, it's always in an area that first it requires someone else. You don't know what's wrong. And I've already been as rude enough to suggest to you what's wrong. If you want to call it wrong, is the mind, the human nervous system, is born incapable at the ordinary level of reaching completion. There is no such thing as completion. That is what drives humanity. That is what even makes possible the automatic, the mechanical, the overall collective level of progress of humanity. As this cannot be satisfied. From the level of consciousness down, everything else can be if you're sane. It can be, and it will be for 60 or 70 years, quite adequately, quite nicely, quite enjoyably. Everything having to do with the body. But from here up, there is no such thing as the same kind of satisfaction from sex or good food, a good night's sleep, and etc., or good exercise. But first, you're born, and if you're genetically sound, you're dissatisfied. And you look to what? You ask your parents, you ask teachers, you ask somebody what to do. And sooner or later, if you're ordinary, you, in a sense, give up. You mature. You get over really wondering what it is going on. I always wanted to know what was going on. I had some kind of great dreams. And you finally get to the level that you accept. It may have been pointed out to you years ago, but you finally, as though exhausted, which is my synonym for being mature, as you're an adult now. You give up up here. As you accept one of them, most people's religion, or most people it's just a general sense of malaise, like, well, what the hell, I'm married now, I got 2 kids, and I'm only 21, so I might as well forget about being a famous musician, a famous writer. I got to make a living. And all the ideas about wondering what's going on in life is only fit in for college reunions, or if you got friends just around and smoke a little pot or have a drink, sit up all night and talk philosophy. But in general, you know, hell, I got to live. The hormones are getting a little weary. You're 21, and you get over it. But what happened, to use the description that could have some practical usefulness to you, is you start out and you took somebody else's description. You no longer even question that, if you'll notice. If I said that anybody that's interested in such as this, what they want to do is be more conscious. The term I've been using, I said, what you've done is you want to be enlightened. You ever heard of that? Most people that's interested in such as this go, yeah, that's what Buddha called it. Enlightened, that's it. And you just accept it. Yeah, I know what I'm after. No, you don't. You didn't make that up. You can say, well, all right, I like yours better. You can blame it on me. You say, I like being more conscious. I like that term. You may like it, but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, if somebody else told you, that's why I keep kind of dance around and change it and play like well, I didn't really mean that. What I meant was be more conscious of the mind. No, I didn't, well, more conscious of, maybe consciousness. Or if you were more aware of what was consciously going on Yeah. But at first it seems as though, or it does, someone has to point out what the problem is. Then they point out, and you finally accept that they say this is the treatment. It's not ever going to be the cure. It's just the treatment, the temporary alleviation, an acceptable alleviation of whatever seems to be bothering you. So yeah, I can't lose weight, I can't quit drinking, but at least I torture myself. I go over those goddamn AA meetings and listen to everybody harp. At least that one night a week I stay sober, because I can't even drink after that. It turns my stomach. Or yeah, I can't lose much weight, but at least I spend 3 or 4 hours over there sitting around with those other fat people, sitting around talking and whining, and at least it's 3 or 4 hours that I can't eat Twinkies. You understand? It's like I go to a psychiatrist, and at least for those 2 or 3 hours. The rest of the time I'm as depressed, and I feel like my mind is about to explode like a cheap toy, like a top that somebody has spun. I keep thinking, inert, finally it's just going to come apart. But at least 2 or 3 hours a week, laying there with that guy in that nice office, with that nice furniture, and that nice couch, and his soothing manner, and knowing it's cost me $200 an hour to lay there, I don't know, it's like at least a couple hours a week, I don't feel quite as nuts. Hey, some people, that's a bargain. Not as good as being a drunk. That's a lot cheaper. Well, plus you don't have to go to anybody's office. But I'm not here promoting either one. So I don't want the psychiatrist or the liquor lobby writing me to thank me. You get somebody that seems to point out the problem, and you get somebody that points out a solution. And as I said, most people, in general, they are not fanatical about religion being the main one, the second part, but they sort of accept the fact that, well, I don't have time to worry about the nature of life and the figure of life, and I used to read weird books when I was a teenager in college, but I don't have time for it now. And if they do feel upset at all, if they do feel sort of echoes of that former interest and this quietness of their soul, then they just go to church. They go to a mass. They go do something that seems to be religious, something that the institutions of life say are for the purpose of alleviating that, of curing or treating that. And they go there, and sure enough, it seems to work for a week, or until they have their next big burst of reminiscing of it. If you identify the problem, a problem specifically, you have a built-in, it's not a weakness in any particular individual, it's the way the mind, the nervous system of man at the top end works. You then can dissipate. That's what I'm trying to explain from my earlier description of it. You will dissipate energies in ways that are not directly related to what you thought was the original problem. What was the original aim? Although, once you see it, you wouldn't call it a problem, but your original aim, all the way from losing weight, trying to be a better person, trying to get over being afraid of people, trying to quit drinking, all the way to trying to be more conscious. Even people who believe that they have read enough or understood enough from talking or thinking about it, that believe that they have some conception of a different state, all the way from the sorts of descriptions that maybe I would use about being more conscious, but there are similar descriptions in religions of a state of grace or the kingdom of God, the satori, being some way internally blown away from what you were, being reborn. They're all the same thing. When it gets into at the religious level, it becomes a kind of collective institution to where they're not concerned with any individual effort that might actually have any chance of success. No one knows what to do. It's just sort of a collective. It's like a Weight Watchers for what was once would-be mystics, and rather than get fat, they got 21, and you go to church instead of Jenny Craig, and you can dissipate your energy there. The kind of concerns that you had, you can go there, and for the time being, from one view, it doesn't accomplish anything. And people admit it, the same way the man goes to a psychiatrist for 10 years, and you say, well, are you cured? Well, hell no, I'm not cured. But he might be your boss. He might be a very successful person. The point being, by every other view, he is quite sane. He's not an idiot, but at first the first time you heard it, you've forgotten now, but you would think, wait a minute, you spend $400 a week going to lay down, and you tell a guy, for an hour, twice a week, you talk to a guy, and you tell him about what you call your problems. He goes, yeah. And you've been doing it for 10 years, yeah. And you're not cured. No. The thing is, if he's sane, you've got to say then, well, what you're up to is not just seeking a cure. Or else you'd be as mad as a psychiatrist as I was a few seconds ago, amazed at your stupidity. In other words, you would have already whipped the man 2 or 3 times up, down his wall. He wouldn't have any that nice furniture left. I would have broken the man's ass by now. Charged me $400 a week for 10 years and nothing? You're not cured? I believe 10 years, a doctor, a cheap graduate from a Bahama law school could probably grow back a severed leg. For that kind of money for 10 years would be worth a try. And you say he hadn't done anything and you still go? The point being, as always, the point being this, that what they say the aim is, what ordinary people are made to say, that my aim is to go to a psychiatrist to be cured. My aim to go to pursue God, to pursue the church is to whatever they say it is. It's generally based upon, I don't want to die. None of it works. It does not. It simply does not work demonstratively. The people involved have to admit, well, yeah, it doesn't work, but so what? And that is it, so what? The people involved with it get something out of it other than success. So let's assume that someone that understands that much has some notion of that. But then they believe the whole idea of being more conscious then becomes victim to a form of the same original dynamics. That being that they believe that they are not quite conscious enough, they're not quite awake enough in consciousness, or the liberation of the mind. We move further up in the Asian continent. They feel like, well, part of my mind is liberated. Well, let's just use the awakening, the enlightenment, whatever term you like. If you ask people, if you found people right now, I'll be even more specific, if we suddenly went into monasteries and schools all over the world involved with what they say is such as this, and you found monks, you found students, neophytes in there involved with some discipline. Let's say do as a Zen, people who have been sitting and meditating, pursuing some course to liberate the mind to achieve enlightenment. And we could interview them, or you could. And we ask, how long have you been doing this? The man says, 10 years. Do it 10 hours a day, do it 7 days a week. And you say, well, have you reached enlightenment? He goes, well, no. If you then could get a man, well, you could get him to. If you ask him in such a way that he could answer this being, if you said, do you concede that you are better off than you were when you came here? He would say yes. Such as the same man, or the man who went to a psychiatrist for 10 years, or is going and has not been cured, and you say, well, are you better off? He goes, yes. You can't push it. You can't, so tell me how. He just said, well, I'm better off. If you take the person following some mystical discipline, and you said, have you reached enlightenment? And he goes, no. Are you better off than you were? Are you more enlightened? I would suggest to you that they would all say, well, yes. If they didn't believe that you were about to start a rhetorical argument, if they say, well, I don't like to put degrees on enlightenment, but if they might respond by saying, if you are asking me, do I understand more about the nature of man, the nature of life? Do I understand more about the workings of my mind? Am I a bit more insightful? Am I more intelligent? Do I know more about being a human and being here alive on this planet than I did when I started? Then the answer is yes. You would be absolutely out of order, wasting your time to disagree with it. But here is the tricky part. There is no degree of being more enlightened. And even if a person is sitting in a hidden mountain monastery built into a cave somewhere, they are in the same kind of situation as our person over at Jenny Craig, who is not losing weight, but is going to the meetings, spending money, sitting around talking about it. She has to drive there. You understand there's a full dynamic of having to go to the Weight Watchers meeting. You got to build your schedule around it. You got to save money out of your job or out of the cookie jar. You got to go pay them. You're supposed to buy certain kinds of food. It becomes a small part of your life that's involved with losing weight. And whether you lose weight or not, or whether you lose as much weight as you wanted to, decreases from its initial importance. If your initial importance the day you started was you looked in the mirror and you finally went, my God, I'm a whale. And you thought, I will do anything. I cannot put up with this. Yeah, you can. Most people can, especially if they undertake something that seems to be leading toward me becoming unwhalish. So you could see the person 10 years later, since I started that with the psychiatrist, so you can see them a year later and say, well, I know she lost a little weight. And I go, yes. You still involved with that weight group? Yes, I am. Well, what was your goal? Yeah, you told me you was going to lose 100 pounds. Yeah, well, I've lost 15 already. And if you looked at all that, well, are you satisfied? And the person very likely will say, yes, it was the best decision I ever made. If I hadn't done that, I would even be fatter, which they could have and they might have. The point is they did not succeed by their own definition, let's say, would be the general scope of what's going on. But it seems to be that they say, I am better. I've lost 15 pounds. I don't look as bad. I feel better, which I'm sure they do. But when you get into the area of the great mystical adventure, you'll never read this, because anyone who knows it will never point it out, and you'll probably never hear it. I don't know why I'm dumb enough it's a Tuesday for me to point it out, because the only people who can hear it will hear it anyway. But it is built in again, even as much difficulty as I've gone through in the years, whether it's done any great good or not, to make it seem as though it's just barely perceivable what the hell I'm talking about. Much less saying, well, here's your problem. You talk about everything but that almost. Talk about life and the way it's arranged, which is a real tricky part. But it's built into the mind that people who are actively involved with it, devoting their life to it. Back to my archetypical, fictional example of a man sitting right now in a monastery, and he's been there for years, pursuing some discipline with a historical lineage. That, in other words, he is greatly impressed that there are people, it has a history, that yes, this is the school derived from Zen master so-and-so or Sufi master so-and-so, and we've been doing this now for nearly 300 years, which is a great defense. In case you show up and go, well, how's this thing work? You have any success? And then go, who the hell are you? You just got into town. Well, I just got off the boat yesterday. And they go, we've been doing this now for 320 years in this same location since the great master died. We buried his bones out here. We have been pursuing this. This is what he did. Well, that's what he said he did. They never like to go into that. Yeah. Well, they can say, well, we can't read his mind. That's what he said he did. Yeah. Plus, they don't seem to notice he normally doesn't tell them that until he's about to die. Yeah. That's in case you think that all mystics are uncharitable and unfeeling and do not have a sense of humor. The mind believes, even people involved with this, let me get more to the point, even people involved with this, there's an absolute fallacy, and you cannot help it. All you can do is realize it, to start with, that you believe, the mind believes that there are varying degrees. If I made this more blunt, if I just said, all right, let's change it over, this is a lecture on the enlightenment, as called by Buddha, of being more conscious. And you talk to people that showed up, that was the title of the lecture. People who believed that they were interested in it. People that maybe had some experience trying to pursue certain disciplines and rituals and etc. Everyone, the mind in everyone already believes, once you start this, that any greater form of consciousness, or the enlightenment, or an awakening of consciousness, whatever the term you like, you believe that it would be selective in you on this basis. And you've got no choice. Right now, all you got to do is check with your mind. I mean, I know as hard as it seems to check with your own mind. But for those of you that realize the difficulty, after we get through the taping, I have an address of this support group that for only $15 a week, they'll go over, or you can go over, and suppose they help you I don't know, something, but anyway, it's cheap, so I got their address after the meeting if you'd like to hear about it. Anyway, if you check with your own mind, and I ask it, if I put it to you in this manner, and you were truthful on your best day, if I said, do you believe that there are ways in which your intelligence, your insight, your understanding of life, that there are some ways that right now that you have less than adequate comprehension of what's going on? That was too convoluted. Are there certain areas that you're just sure that you're just absolutely stupid, too opinionated? And everybody, all you got to do is have some knowledge of your mind. You go, yeah, I have a real negative thing about the government or about religion in general. Or I seem to have this, I got a real amount of kind of mental hostility against political theories that are foreign to me. I've got some sort of aggressive ideas. I have very hostile daydreams about the opposite sex. All the normal things. Everyone would say that, and you understand, that's just you and I talking now. And that you looked at your own mind, you go, yeah, I've got areas in me that are absolutely blind. I've got areas in me that if we were going to compare a man's intellect to fruit, I've got some places that are just absolutely spoiled. They're rotten over here. I mean, I have hatreds, prejudice. I have automatic negative reactions toward ideas, certain kinds of people, politics, religion, all sorts of things. You just say, well, that's natural. You think, and so, that is true. And if I say, well, do you see that as being like, would that be the normal level of your consciousness? And you go, well, no. And I say, well, is that like the normal level of your insight, your understanding of life? No. Because here's what the mind believes. If we said this whole thing is about what Buddha called, still a nice term, an awakening, an enlightenment, that one day, after all this stuff that he'd been through, that one day, sitting there, he went boing, or something went boing, and he looked and he went, well, I'll be damned. That he understood what life was about. That's what it's all about. If you describe to people and you said, that's what this is about, if that's what you're interested in, and they go, yes. And you go, would you think that your mind, you're interested in it right now, are you approaching it all like from the same level? That if this happens to you, do you see it as being piecemeal? Do you see that it's going to open up certain areas of your understanding, or all of it? You see, I'm having trouble saying this to you directly because there's no way to say it directly. Because to say it directly would be for me to tell you not to stand on the ground intellectually. But I'm going to get around in a minute. Some of you are going to get it. The mind believes, if it accepts the idea of enlightenment, that experience, to wherein you suddenly know what life is about. I say suddenly, it may take you 50 years, but suddenly it goes boing, and you go, ah. If I ask you now, I'm going to have to go ahead and speak for you to try to firm this up a little bit. You would never sit around and describe it this way, but you believe this. You accept this because this is the way the mind works. The mind has to work in bits and pieces. It works locally. It works linearly. You believe right now, without even thinking about it, I'm going to tell you how the mind is. You believe that if there's this thing, the enlightenment, that there are parts of your mind now that are this close, parts of your understanding, and then there are parts that are probably this far away. That's, those real bad parts, those kinds of just automatic hatreds and rejections of parts of life, the kinds of aggressions you have, that you just think, well, it's got to be. That's got nothing to do with understanding life, me just having an automatic negative reaction to other people's religion or to other cultures. So you go, well, but the mind doesn't think that way. That what I'm trying to point out to you, it assumes that's correct. Because an ordinary person's mind, they believe they're giving you some damn near insightful confession themselves to say, hey, you wouldn't believe some of the things I think. Of course, don't tell me that, but people say that, God, you wouldn't believe some of the horrible, I've killed people in my mind. And boy, God, you don't know how mad I can get. But then they say, but there are other parts of me. I can see a movie about Bambi or an old yellow dog, and I'll cry, or I'll see pictures of starving children, and it just breaks my heart. And so a person believes there are parts of my mind, if we're going to take enlightenment, increased consciousness, knowing what life's about as the goal, the mind and everyone assumes that it is selective. I know it didn't make sense 30 minutes ago, that the enlightenment, when it happens, is not just some blanket something, because there's parts of you that are close to it now. All right, closer than others. The parts of you that are charitable, the parts of you that cry when you hear about injustice in the world and hunger, the kind, I mean, that hurts you. Sitting there by yourself, you're not showing off. You know that that part of your mind, your spirit is your heart, as your parents used to call it, but you just know that that part is closer to the awakening, to the understanding of what life's about, than the parts of you that hate every damn Irish Republican in the world, or every, you know. You just know that's true, and you're wrong. You're wrong. Seeing what life's about, the comparison that, well, I know in some ways I'm closer than others, you're wrong. Well, think about the fun of it. Now, I'm not just saying you're wrong just for me to stand here and say you're wrong. You might also consider, not that I need proof, but why, for those that will assume they actually had it, let's say the Buddhas and the people, so I'll be down. And they almost had to be beaten and tricked and a handful of close friends for them to say anything. And most of them at least said, look, I can't tell you what it is I see, but you know, you're my friends and you've stuck with me all these years and we all tried to do it together, so all right, I'm going to tell you the best I can, but I'm telling you right now, what I'm about to say is not going to be it. And of course, if you never had it, in his case, the 12 months, I went, well, you know, damn, that's better than anything else we got. But he told me, he said, listen, I know what's going to happen already. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't even mention this. Because I can't tell you what it is. I see it, but I can't tell you. I simply cannot. But I know you won't know, and hell, if it hadn't been for you guys, maybe I wouldn't be here. We've been buddies all these years, so I'm going to tell you. And they went, all right. And he said, but this is not it. Then it comes out again selective. But to see what's going on in life, it is not that, try to make it even simpler. It is not, you're not going to discover that some of the things you knew were sort of right, and that some of the things that you suspected were a little more right, a little more correct. And of course, some of the things that you just didn't understand at all, you were right. Or some of the things that you figured that you always had them wrong, that you couldn't really understand the whole purpose of education or of economic whatever. And you're just sure. You understand it'd be like if I drew an intellect made up of all kinds of little lines like a graph, and you believe that the enlightenment in some way, understanding what life is, you believe that your mind, your understanding, your consciousness right now, let's say is like that. Let's say that's some of the low points, that's your real aggressive, hateful, opinionated feelings, and up here you feel like it's some of the ideas you have, like you see photographs of the Cathedral of Notre Dame and you almost cry. And you just feel like you're getting closer to, your feeling then is that of knowing what life was about, the kind of enlightenment you feel would be something that would come fall upon you, your understanding like that, you understand, and would fill in, see, based upon you individually, you understand? Would make you now the enlightened, you would now be the Buddha. You would now have Buddhahood. You would now have the Tibetan liberation of the mind. It would now be completed. You would be fulfilled by it having filled in all the blank places. Wrong. This is all just made up. Well, I think Buddha called it illusion. It's as real as it can be. It's as real as it can be, because any sane person, if you ask them, the kind of things I've just been talking about, if you ask any sane person, that would be proof of their sanity. If you said you have parts of your mind, your attitude, your mental attitude of life, are there parts of your mind that you just completely disfavor? And they'll go, yeah. Well, there are things that I can't understand why I think them. Some of the kinds of hatreds and the nasty things I think about people. And I go, well, are there other parts of your mind that you approve of? Well, certainly. And they would say, I'm like any ordinary, sane person. I have my good parts, I have my bad parts. Remember, we're speaking strictly above the level of consciousness. We're not talking about their behavior in life or whether they're charitable and whether they're fat or thin or skinny or good health. We're talking about here. As long as you believe that, as long as you operate on that basis, even if you try not to identify a problem, even if you say, well, I don't believe that there's evil forces trying to keep me from awakening. Of course, I keep saying that, and I might as well tell you there are. It's known as life. It's known as habit. It's known as gravity. It's known as life being set up in with a certain kind of momentum, and you're trying to suddenly stand up and say, wait a minute, can I say? And it's the universe's largest parade. I mean that literally. It consists of everything in the universe is marching in a certain way, and you suddenly, and you've been there for years, you're marching along, and suddenly you go, could I ask a... And it doesn't kill you, but you get back up. It's the idea of trying. It's the same thing as trying to become conscious of consciousness. It's trying to bring consciousness under your own attention, and you try to do it. I do not exaggerate. Many of you know that by now, that I do not exaggerate when I say everything in the universe. If you want to talk about evil forces, don't look for Satan, Lucifer, the Hindu destroyers, life, because it's all going like this, and you try to stop and go, could I? And all you got to do is sit there and try it. There's nothing dangerous. You think, all right, I'm going to hold my attention right now. I'm just going to be conscious of consciousness. And you can do it that long. That is, you can do it long enough to go, could I stop? But then look what happened. It's the way the mind is, because you go, I can do it. I can do it. Now I can start making it up as fast as you can. Then just, you don't know why. Internally, you can still be staring straight ahead like, all right, I got it. But if you could look in your eyes, you know damn well you don't, because you go, huh. And then it's off about something about Buddha, something I just said, or it could be anything. You cannot reel it in under any continuing condition. And it's not because of an evil force and not because of a flaw in you. It's because of the way the thing is structured. And it is because of a very understated, no, it's not understated, it's just a blunt reality of it, is everything in life is arranged to keep you from doing it. Not because it singled you out, but life has already got things arranged and it's moving a certain way through humanity, and for you to attempt to do that is an anomaly. There is nothing in life to encourage it in you individually. The only reason it's possible, the only reason it strikes some people, is that it is in man collectively. That man collectively is becoming more enlightened. That people right now as a whole are more enlightened, they're more Buddha-like than Buddha's contemporaries were. People are now more Christ-like than they were when Jesus was alive. People are now more Jewish than when Abraham and Moses were alive. People are now more Islamic than when Muhammad was alive. It happens collectively. It's the only reason that it's available. It's the only reason that anybody knows about it. It's the only reason we're sitting here and staying here talking about it. It's collectively, it's already in the genetic makeup of man, but it's going at a certain speed. And would-be mystics, all the Buddhists and everybody, they want to jump up and down the parade and holler, you know, let's get this sumbitch going, or what's going on? Why's everybody going so slow? Come on. And they keep going. And you jump up and you knock back down, except they don't knock you down. If you go somebody to blame life. See where that gets you. The enlightenment does not fill in blanks. And there's no part, it is not selective is the point. If it was selective, then I would suggest, assuming they would actually play with literature and public speech, but let's assume that the Buddhas and Jesus actually existed and actually said some of the things they were remembered as having said. They would have not, after that, said anything that seemed to specify something particular. Well, let's get off the subject of it being an individual, at least in anybody's mind, and get distracted. If there was something valid and useful to be said, you would not say afterwards that, all right, the enlightenment stops a person from blanking. That you will stop hating your neighbor if you were a Christian. Because then you go, well, they got my number, because you know, that's one of my great hobbies. One of my great negative hobbies is hating my fellow man. And it's saying, all right, if you were enlightened, if you had Christ consciousness, if you were a true Muslim, if you were a true servant of Allah, that is in a different state of consciousness, you would not hate your neighbor. And that sounds just right to somebody. If that wasn't your problem, they turn around to something else and they say, plus, you would not covet your neighbor's wife. You go, well, boy, you're getting close to me now. You would not be greedy. they point out the kinds of things, the problems that being more conscious would cure, which is this. And you go, all right, now we're getting somewhere because that's my problem. That's not your problem. The enlightenment does not cure anything and is not selective. It does not fill in a blank because there's no part of your understanding. I'm just going to tell you point blank. Well, I already did, but now I got to admit I'm telling you point blank. There's no part of anyone's consciousness to start with that's closer to enlightenment than any other part. And of course that can't be true because you think, well, you've already explained it yourself. There are parts of your mind, there are parts right now that everybody thinks. There are parts of my mind, my soul or spirit if you're still old-fashioned. There are parts of my mind that are closer to, by anybody's definition, a better condition. There are parts of my mind that are charitable and loving to my fellow man. Very small parts, but you know, they're there. You know, like this one, it's like reaching up to the heavens to a higher level of consciousness. But there are parts down here that you don't hear about. It's a swamp. I'm ashamed of it. If I had time, I'd probably go into analysis, or I'd take drugs. That is horrible. There's no sane way. You would not be sane to tell an ordinary person that that's not true, because to them it is true. But what I'm telling you is, you're going to find out, some of you already got strong taste. Let's just go, I said I'd be blunt, that kind of enlightenment, the state. It is not that you go, well now I see I was partially right about so-and-so, but when I was thinking about religion or this and that, I was close. Boy, was I close. But I got to admit, over here, in this other area, I wasn't even close. No. If we're going to take this to be in the human mind, what it does, I wish this was like a holograph that I could handle in 3 dimensions. Then the enlightenment falls on a whole person, and it's like, if this is the human mind, it just goes, this is not going to work, but what it does is like squash all that. Is that a good word for you? It takes all this here, if it did exist, and it squashes it, or is it squishes it, down to right here. It goes. How about that? Does that? There is no selective remedial effect of enlightenment. It's that everything in your mind is worthy of this, to use my, not parts. Enlightenment does not look down and think, well, you know, he's not too far off when it comes to matters of religion. The crude way of putting it is years ago in one of those public books I wrote, I used to get a lot of mail about that people just loved it. Somewhere I just stated that everything you know is wrong. That was like the one whole chapter, the heading, that everything you know is wrong. Which is so blunt and crude and easy to say, but I used to get all kinds of mail for years. People, I've been working on that for years before I ever wrote to tell you how much I enjoyed it. Anybody enjoyed it didn't understand it. But it's a fact. Everything you know is wrong, but you can tell somebody that and they think, well, you know, what kind of Zen monastery did you get thrown out of to come up with that? You know, what a cheap shot, say everything you know is wrong, but it's true. Because if you could start off on that basis, you'd do what I've been attempting to do, is save a lot of time, if it's possible. I'm still not convinced it's possible. I can always be proven that I have wasted a number of years doing it this way. But trying not to be, you got to admit, I can be vaguer. I can be more vague than Zen stories translated through like 3 different languages, like into Russian, and then Croat, and then back to Italian, then Greek, and then into English, and they just barely make sense. I can stand here and ad lib and be more vague than they are, and still apparently just stay on the edge of making sense. But there's a reason. There was an intention. Whether it works or not, as I said, we still stand, it remains to be seen. But what you're going to find out, that the intention was correct, because there's no way, there's no piecemeal, there's no parts of you that need to be knocked down and parts lifted up, and yet everything in you says that there is. You know, it's one thing at a time. A guy's an overweight alcoholic. All right, I'll go to and I join Weight Watchers, I'll lose weight. Now I'll go join AA and I'll lose, you know, I'll quit drinking. And then if I gain money left, I'll go to a psychiatrist and do something about my temper. That's the way people feel like with their parts of my consciousness that need to be, you know, encouraged, the good parts. Sure they do. I'm not going to discourage them. It's got nothing to do with enlightenment. That's civilization's job. We're all in favor of everybody else wanting to improve themselves out there in the street. We should all be in favor of that. Keep the parade going. But inside of someone doing this, there is no selective form. Enlightenment does not come down in pieces, and it does not fill in blanks. If it did, what I was going to suggest, again, would be that the Buddhas and Jesus and everyone would not have even laid down hints to you that, look, what I saw can't be described. What I can see life is can't be described. I know, but you won't know, so here goes. And everybody just forgets the first part. This part of the human mind. It's like a comedian. It's like a singer come at you, saved all these years to go out and see Aretha Franklin. And she shows up and she says, well, I appreciate you being here. Since I don't fly, I had to ride in an air-conditioned limousine for 200 miles. And my throat's a little sore, but I'll do my best. It's like a preface. People assume it's a preface that anybody's going to put on an act, whether it be Buddha, James Brown, Horowitz, that they're going to go, well, this is not my favorite violin, but then when the airline lost it. But I'll do my best. You're used to hearing it. The Enlightenment, there is no intro to it. But I was going to assure you it is not a filling in of some blank. And the thing is, if a Buddha, if the people throughout history, I'm just playing with reality now, because it could not have happened, if they had attempted to be more straightforward, there would be no Buddhism, there'd be no Christianity, there would be no Islam, using those as the known examples, not that they're all there are. But there would not be any, because the so-called founders of them, once they reached enlightenment, once Jesus became Christ, once Abraham became the real Jew, once Muhammad became the slave of God, and etc. In other words, once they reached enlightenment, they would have never said a word. That doesn't prove anything, you understand. But if they were going to do their best, they would have never said a word. That's the best description. Because it's not. If it had been otherwise, they would have said, first off, all right, which is what religion now does. But they would have said, all right, here's what it is. Now, we're all pretty decent people here, all of us. We're all Arabs, we're all Italians, whoever we are. We all know each other. We got one civilization. And in some areas, we've made good progress, for instance, in sewage control. And we've cleaned up a lot of the problems in our Senate, especially through the marches of the Ides of March and certain periodic knife play in the Senate does have the tendency to keep out certain amounts of graft periodically to clean. At any rate, they would say there are certain things that we do. We're better at this than we are at some other things. And here's what we should do. The striving for enlightenment is to make us better blanks. It's to improve our charitable nature. It's to improve our ability to get along with our neighbors here of other cultures and other beliefs and religions. And it is to probably also to help decrease this kind of militaristic drive that seems to be inherent here in us Athenians, or whoever we are. And people, that sounds, what else makes sense? The only other thing that a Buddha or someone could do was come out and say, well, every damn thing we've ever done, everything we've thought has been wrong. Yeah, right. I mean, you would have never heard of it. You would never heard of anything if that was the basis of anything in life. But it's anything having to do with the internal life of man to say, all right, everything about you now, if there's going to be a little more truthful as always, is say, are you satisfied with what you are internally? And they'll show up and go, no. They go, okay, you want to know what to do. There we are. Well, let me tell you first off, internally right now, you think some things are worse than others. They go, yeah. Everything inside of you is wrong. Everything you know is wrong. And somebody says, well, could I ask? No. Well, you mean it? No. No. Unconditionally, everything you know is wrong. The mind can do absolutely nothing with that. All you can make out of it is some kind of cheap-ass fortune cookie Zen sayings. Because the mind, if it tries its best to listen to that, if I said, listen, this is the most important thing I could ever tell you, is everything you know is wrong. By God, believe it. And the mind goes, and it can't be true. The mind will not operate on that basis because what it's done, it has bypassed the electrochemical basis, the binary basis that runs the mind. To say that everything you know is wrong would be telling the mind, all right, don't stand on your feet. Don't ever touch the earth. Tell a tree to climb itself. Tell a hand to grab itself. The mind, it just stops, which is real close to Maybe being able to do something. Except with ordinary people, it's like a momentary lapse, and it's like somebody turned out the lights. Identifying problems, naming systems, and giving people specific things to do, it's not that everybody's done it incorrectly, but it is built in that will dissipate energy, that you will spend energy driving over to the Weight Watchers. Mm-hmm. Even if you lose weight, you got to get back to what sounds like, at the ordinary level, a sarcastic intro to this, that if you actually wanted to lose weight, what's the efficient way to lose weight? I mean, the efficient way. Stay home, quit eating. You saved whatever they charge you at the meetings. You saved the gas of driving over there. There's no way. You cannot deny the fact. Of course, you're an ordinary person. You go, but, and you could deny it, but you can't deny it prima facie. Just say, all right, the way to quit drinking is don't join a group. Quit drinking. Do not drink any more alcohol. That's it. And you got to, well, yeah, that's right, but, and then you got to say something. If you realize that the mind does believe, like I said, you can't just immediately jump from there, but the first part, if you can realize that your mind does believe. Again, notice I have been the great mind reader. We ought to take, the mind believes that there's some parts that you are closer to enlightenment, you're closer to right thinking, you're closer to being intelligent in certain areas than you are other areas. You are wrong. They're all the same. And you'll find out. And I know that doesn't prove anything right now, but if you consider that fact, and then consider what I'm saying of how much time you waste right now, how much energy you waste, that you worry about the specific things wherein you are, without any doubt, you never question it, there are things about the operations of your mind that are strictly ready for the junk heap, ready for analysis, ready for some sort of remodeling, that you're just waiting maybe for enlightenment to fill in these bad holes, to cure the swamps, to drain them. And then there are parts of your mind that should be encouraged. You can always be, if you don't get really naughty about it, look at yourself, whatever your age you are, and think, well, I've been fooling around with this for years and years, and I'm 20 or 30 or 40 years old, and how much closer am I by listening to this? Well, I'll answer for you. But you can feel better. You think, well, at least I'm beginning to identify the problem. That didn't sound like the man, well, I've been going to him for 10 years, twice a week. Are you cured? Well, wait a minute. Well, he insinuates. Sometimes he'll smile at me. I tell him, don't you think I'm getting close to what the problem is? The more I talk about my family, and he'll kind of go, So I think we're making progress. 10 years. I assume we're out of tape. Okay. Did you stop somewhere appropriate? When the tape ran out.